It was late autumn when I took a job at a local convenience store, the kind of place that stayed open 24 hours a day. I was fresh out of college and desperate for cash while I searched for a real job. The pay was decent, and the hours were flexible, but working the night. At first, the nights were uneventful. I'd spend my time stocking shelves, restocking snacks, and chatting with a few regulars who dropped by for late-night cravings. I felt safe in the familiar routine, with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the comfort of the cameras watching every corner of the store. However, I quickly learned that the night shift had its own kind of darkness. One night, around 1 a.m., a chilling breeze swept through the store as the door opened. In walked a man in a long, tattered coat, his face obscured by the shadows of the hood. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I forced myself to smile and greeted him. "Welcome to Sam's. Can I help you find something?" He didn't respond. He just shuffled down the aisle, dragging his fingers along the shelves. I couldn't help but feel eyes on me as he moved, the silence stretching between us like a taut wire. My gut instinct screamed at me to be cautious, but I tried to brush it off, convincing myself it was just the quiet of the night playing tricks. As he wandered, the store felt heavier, almost suffocating. The man continued to plod along, rarely looking at the products, keeping his gaze low. He eventually approached the counter with a single can of soda, placing it down without a word. I scanned the item, my heart racing more than it should have. "That'll be $1.50, I said, trying to maintain my composure. He stared at me for what felt like an eternity, his dark eyes boring into mine. I could see nothing but emptiness in them. After a long pause, he dug into his coat and fished out a handful of coins, dropping them chaotically on the counter. The sound of metal clinking echoed harshly, adding to the discomfort of the moment. I cautiously counted the few coins, realizing there was just enough to cover the cost. "Thanks," I said, forcing a grin as I handed him his change. He took it, his fingers brushing against mine, cold and clammy. He turned and walked toward the exit, but just as he reached the door, something compelled me to call out, "Have a good night." He paused, but didn't turn around. After a moment, he muttered something indistinct, a low, guttural sound that sent chills racing through me. I hesitated, debating whether to ask him to clarify or let it go. However, he pushed the door open and disappeared into the night, leaving me standing there unsettled. I tried to shake it off, returning to my tasks. However, the unease clung to me as the hours ticked by, the unsettling encounter replaying in my mind. Around 3 a.m., the phone behind the counter rang. I hadn't been expecting any calls at this hour. I picked it up hesitantly, my heart pounding. "Hello," I answered. There was no response, just silence on the other end. I felt a prickling sensation creep up my spine. It wasn't the first time I'd received a prank call, but this one felt different. Before I could hang up, I heard a soft, raspy voice whisper, "I see you." Panic surged through me. I nearly dropped the phone. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. But the line went dead. I hung up and stared at the phone in disbelief. What was happening? I glanced around the store, feeling exposed with every passing second. Each shadow seemed to grow larger. Every creak of the floor felt like the weight of the unknown bearing down on me. As the clock ticked toward 4 a.m., I was startled by the sound of the bell above the door ringing. A figure stepped inside, wrapped in the same long coat as before. My heart dropped as I recognized the man from earlier. He stood at the entrance, eyes scanning the store, as if searching for something or someone. I wanted to sink beneath the counter, to disappear from his gaze. Instead, I kept my eyes on him, waiting for the inevitable. He approached the counter again, this time with a different demeanor. He leaned in closer, his face inches from mine, and his breath was cold like the dead of winter. "Is this where she is?" he rasped, his voice almost a whisper. "Where is she?" I stared, paralyzed with fear. "I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered. He didn't flinch. His gaze was intense, overwhelming. "You have to help me," he insisted, voice rising. "You have to tell me where she is." "Please leave," I pleaded, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't help you." He recoiled slightly, staring at me with a mix of desperation and anger. Then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he turned and bolted out of the store, leaving me breathless and trembling. I called the police, recounting the bizarre and unsettling night I was having. They arrived shortly after, but the man was long gone. They assured me that he was likely just a troubled individual and that I had done the right thing by calling. However, I felt a deep sense of unease. They were gone in minutes, leaving me once again alone. The rest of my shift dragged on, every noise heightened in my anxiety. Just before dawn, I could only think of getting out of there. When my relief finally arrived, I rushed home, locking the door behind me and praying that I would never have to encounter that man again. I don't know who or what he was looking for. I still feel that lingering darkness from that night, an unshakable feeling that, though it passed, a part of it remains with me. I never returned to that convenience store for the night shift again. It was a cold, dreary October when I took on my first job as a night security guard at a local factory. Located at the outskirts of town, the factory had been closed for years, its dilapidated buildings erected long before anyone could remember. The owners had decided to hire a guard to deter any vandalism or trespassing. As a poor college student, the pay was too good to pass up, even if I had my doubts about the safety of working alone during those long, uneventful night shifts. The first few nights were nothing more than routine. I showed up at 10 p.m., equipped with nothing but a flashlight, a faded logbook, and an old radio. The factory loomed ominously against the dark sky, its broken windows resembling hollow eyes watching my every move. I parked my car in front of the massive, rusty gate, reminding myself of the security protocols I had been taught. Settling into the guard booth, I flicked through radio stations as the hours wore on, listening to the static-filled broadcasts while jotting down my rounds. The place was eerily quiet, filled only with the occasional creaks and groans of an old building. Around 2 a.m., everything changed. A loud bang echoed from deep within the factory, jarring me from my thoughts. My heart raced as I listened closely. Again, it sounded a metallic clang that reverberated through the empty space. I grabbed my flashlight and peered out the booth, scanning the factory grounds. As I stepped outside, the chilly night air prickled against my skin, heightening my senses. I moved toward the source of the noise, making my way through the darkened pathways lined with rusted machinery. The beam of my flashlight sliced through the oppressive darkness, revealing eerie shapes that loomed around me. The air grew still as I reached the loading dock, and I hesitated at the entrance, my instincts screaming at me that something wasn't right. Just then, I caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow flitting behind a stack of pallets. I focused the beam of my flashlight in that direction, but nothing was there. I stood frozen, heart pounding, straining to listen to the echoes of the night. The unease settled deeper into my bones. As I turned to leave, a figure suddenly appeared from the shadows, an emaciated man with sunken eyes and a tattered coat. His skin was pallid, almost sickly, and he gazed at me with a look of wild desperation. At first, I thought he was just another drifter, lost and disoriented. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as fear twisted in my stomach. "You have to help me," he rasped, voice hoarse. "It's not safe. They're coming for me." "Who's coming? What are you talking about?" I demanded, tense and caught between compassion and caution. He looked over his shoulder, eyes wide with terror. "I can't let them get me. We need to leave now." Before I could respond, the man's demeanor shifted. He suddenly seemed less like a frightened human and more like something otherworldly, a wild creature driven by panic. My instincts flared, and I took a cautious step back. Just then, he lunged toward me, revealing a mouth stretched too wide, teeth sharp and menacing. In the shadow of something moving quickly from the other side of the factory flickered behind him. So my heart dropped. Whatever held sway over this man was now upon us. Without thinking, I bolted toward the guard booth. The frigid wind whipped at my face as I sprinted, glancing back to see the man no longer just a man bearing down on me with inhuman speed, teeth bared in a chilling grin. The feeling of dread intensified as I fumbled for my radio, praying for a way out. Desperate, I called dispatch, my voice trembling. "Please, I need help. There's something wrong, something chasing me." A calm voice responded, "Can you describe the situation?" But my words came out in gasps. The figure grew closer behind me, shadow stretching and pulling me into its grasp. There's a creature, a man, no, not a man." I screamed, fear and adrenaline propelling my voice. "It's coming for me. Stay. Calm. Help is on the way," the operator assured me, but the sound of my heartbeat drowned out her voice. I dove into the booth, locking the door and pressing my back against it. The creature slammed into the booth, rattling the structure as it tried to force its way inside. I braced myself, desperately whispering into the radio, "Please hurry." Outside, the shadow swirled, creating a cacophony of frantic whispers that clawed at my sanity. It felt like time slowed as I awaited help, the oppressive darkness closing in around me. In my mind, I could see the creature's eyes, unrelenting and malevolent, even as I tried to fight against the terror. Suddenly, I heard the telltale sound of sirens approaching, piercing through the night. The creature paused, its movements faltering, as if sensing the oncoming light of the patrol cars. The sirens grew louder, echoing through the empty yard. In an instant, the figure turned and fled back into the shadows, merging with the darkness as the police arrived. They swarmed the area, flashlights dancing through the night, cutting through the veil of fear that had enveloped me. When they finally reached me, I stumbled out of the booth, breathless and trembling. "Did you see it? Did you see him?" I asked, shaking. One of the officers, an older man with a steady gaze, nodded. "You did well to call us," he replied, providing a reassuring pat on my shoulder. "You're safe now." Though I could barely comprehend what had just happened, I knew that whatever specter had haunted that factory was gone, a glimpse into the depths of fear and despair that lurked beneath the surface of the familiar. I quit that job the very next day, and even though I was offered more shifts, I never returned to the factory. The experience left a mark, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can reside in seemingly innocent places.